Good evening, this is Ronald Allen, managing change through effective communications. Today's discussion, stealing home base. And we're not just talking about baseball or cricket, as we used to slide into those fortunate hits when we just tap the ball to silly mid-on and run like hell to get to the other side of the wicket. Stealing home base means anticipating and seeing openings in communications that others have basically, shall I say, opened the door for you to steal. And I'll give you an example of an incredible opportunity that I'm very fortunate to say has now allowed me to secure a contract, because I took the fortitude of simply saying, if I don't try, if I don't implement, and I don't like the word try, it's an excuse for not succeeding, or at least recognizing that you're not able to acquire or achieve the level of desired outcomes, objectives that you're looking for. Rather, the opportunity was expressed as a frustration with a production cycle that a company was experiencing, and they had 3, if not 4 different vendors all participating in the cycle of delivering a physical product, and yet the process, the protocols were not in place. And there were many excuses. As we know, people will always say, I'm not trained, I've only just started the job, things have changed. Of course, you're going to hear it time and time again now about the COVID-19 being the big excuse. Well, I'm going to tell you right here, right now, just take those excuses and wipe them off the board. Just wipe them off the board, because everybody wants to hide behind that message that there is a bigger challenge, a bigger force. I submit to you that that challenge is your opportunity to effectively communicate and show why your approach will enhance, support, and help to deliver the type of outcomes the process, the organization, the situation demands. So let me give you, as much as I can, detail on what transpired. So I was brought into this particular company. They wanted me to speak with their people. And I asked them, I said, well, how many different vendors, partners do you have? Well, immediately I could see from their faces that no one had really asked or approached the situation in this manner. So we found out there were 4 distinct vendors in the process of, as I said, delivering this product. So I set about getting an understanding of each one of their protocols, what they thought was their job. And I said, well, who is your end client? And many of them even shirked that question by simply saying, we just deliver to those that have to take the product from point A to point B. And those at point B would say, well, my responsibility is to take it from point B, who A delivers, to, you guessed it, point C. And of course, those in point C said and expressed very adamantly that the product, the responsibility, the expectation was that A and B have done their job, and if they haven't, there's nothing I can do about it, but I'll still deliver to the end customer D. So that's a real crapshoot, right? Let's be honest. That's a serious crapshoot. And many customers, good evening, and thanks for checking in. Many customers will fault the whole process, or they will default to the primary service provider. And it can be any company. We're not here to point at companies. We're talking about effective communications in the process and opening up opportunities in that process where communication fails. And once again, you know my style. I'll take a business example and match it with our family private. I will also take a family example and match it with business, because communications is communications. It's the benefit is in the details. The opportunity is in how we can bring people together, mutually collaborative effects, right? Benefits, approach, a methodology that says we're all in it together, and truly all in it together. Yes, there are different charges, there are different level of benefits, as we've seen in board members and corporate executives. Their mandate, their reward system is based on a very different model than, say, middle management executives. Then, of course, down below, you have those who are in charge of departments, supervisors, managers, those who are the grunts. Most of us are grunts, believe it or not. I know a lot of people want to feel that they're a chief, but at the same time, when you look at the end of the year, and you will see that quite clearly, that most of us have to respond to the beat of that drum. So my example today in talking about taking charge of communications, you finding an opportunity where there is a lack of communication, instead of falling in line with the rest of the humdrum, oh my goodness, there's nothing we can do, this is my little fiefdom, this is my little area. Pamela, good evening, thanks for checking in. This is my little AJ. Okay, great, thank you. This is my little area of responsibility. What I did was I said, well, guys, let's pull all of us together. And despite the pushback, despite the emotional and vocal resistance, I said, well, our responsibility is to the end customer. My responsibility as a coach in communications is to pull together collaborative efforts and identify each person's area of reward, which then serves and supports the responsibility that they should have in the process. So we had 4 entities. We identified each one's existing, present, today understanding of their responsibility, and then said, how would you improve the process? And then I asked them, the third set of questions was, and from A to B to C to D and back to A, I said, how does that improve the process? So you've got an identified challenge. You've seen that, okay, a product has not been put in the right space. It is not coded correctly. Someone is not placing it on the right side, a label. Maybe the timing, the expectations of delivery are not realistic. And we documented that, and we showed that physically, the physics of moving an object from A to B was or is not realistic given the constraints of that deliverable. When you do that, and I don't care if you're an intern, not even being paid, you will show your value in effectively communicating what is possible, what is realistic, right? So now we got into people feeling a little, shall we say, put upon, where they would say, well, that's not your area of responsibility. And I'm sure many of you have heard the expression, stay in your lane. Well, my lane is to improve the process, not just talk about it, but show quantitatively and qualitatively. Now, I know many of you are going to say, oh my goodness, this is not what my job is all about. I'm afraid it is. Every job today is based on metrics. Those metrics are designed by people that in 9 out of 10 times, probably 11 out of 10 times, have never done the job, right? And they're simply looking at production. Now, many of us may or may not be familiar with the history of human resources. No, it's not about your benefits. It's about how can I get you, the corporation, get you, the employee, to do more work efficiently so that I get more profit, period. If you don't believe me, send me an email. I'll send you, as we say in therapy, the evidence of the research, okay? So back to our little story here. We've got 4 entities, all complaining and frustrated about the process and the ability to deliver a physical product, not just a service in this case, which sets up a whole other parameters of challenges. And each level trying to make their process as seamless as possible. And yet, in recognizing that, in doing that, they're actually making the full process of delivering that product more difficult, because they're not taking into consideration how they could share a benefit improvement, a process system that may improve how that product is delivered by them and then delivered to that third or fourth entity. If you think of how a product gets into the market, right? We came down to, and I know a lot of people want to say, well, what was the bottom line? That approach, when you say, well, what's the end result? What's the bottom line? You negate the value of including everybody's input into that process, into the way the product is packaged, the way the product is placed to be delivered to the next unit, next entity that needs to take that product and move it to the next stage, right? So it doesn't matter where you are. It really doesn't matter what product you're moving, including, shall we say, preparing for work and getting your children organized. It's the same mindset. How do I prepare? How do I organize the breakfast? How do I organize the clothes? Do I prepare the car? Do I have my wallet, my keys, my credentials ready the night before? You see, that's what's so interesting about effective communications, managing life through effective communications. Because if we're preparing before and then we're noticing the nuances of whether we are actually acting out in a favorable, optimizing manner. And I know this sounds a little clinical. I know this sounds a little analytical. But let's face it. It's the frustration in not having a smooth run for the day. Good evening, Curtis. Thanks for checking in. Not having a smooth run, a process during the course of our day that sets us off, that makes us frustrated, that literally, and coining the term, trauma is then impacted on our lives. So just going over one little time again, just kind of going a little deeper here. Some of the vendors asked me, why do I approach it in this manner? And I said, well, if every day you're exhibiting the same frustration with a process that you have to go through every single day, by midweek, you are mentally and physically burnt out. So when there is a mistake, people will quickly push it under the rug, they'll push it aside, they'll move it to someone else's responsibility. So now the system breaks down. The pleasure of coming to work is demoralized. You are not effectively pleasant, you are not effectively well, and believe it or not, you start to get sick, mentally, physically sick. And this is documented. We have resources on my site that talk about how the emotional quotient of working in your job is tied directly to the ability of communicating with your colleagues, your upline, your downline, and at least being part of a process to improve it. So this is not nefarious. It's not intangible, even though we do talk about intangible assets producing tangible results. It is exactly being able to sit down with someone, even though it might take a few times. And I do encourage you, the first time you go to bat, to begin to improve, not to challenge, not to be the one carrying the banner to say, I've got the results. Quite the opposite. We talk about servant leadership. We talk about emotional intelligence. We talk about emotional quotient. They're all focused on collaborative, what we call mutually collaborative efforts. And it starts with intent. It starts with saying, if I have to bring a product from a truck, if I have to bring a product from a kiosk, if I'm presenting a product to a client, and it's a phase of improvements that's going to be delivered, I need their buy-in. My communication with that client then must be in a way that says, what do you think? What were your expectations? How can we improve the process? And not to be flippant about it, right? Because you may do this very well, then your charge, as we say, being a professional, is to elevate the competency and skill set of your colleagues. By the way, part of the challenge in this life cycle of delivering this product was exactly that. If you were much better, if you were more efficient, if you are, then why are you not sharing that skill with someone else? Is it because perhaps you're actually intimidated? Is it because perhaps you've been brought up with that notion that what's mine is mine, you've got to get yours? This reminds me of another individual that I actually mentored, and he shared with me a quick story, a simple story, that when the vendors, and this was high-tech pharmaceutical, when the vendors were brought in, one of the most important questions was, how do you intend to collaborate with us? And if the vendor did not know how to respond to that, they were not chosen. Not because they were incompetent of delivering the end goods, products, or service benefit. Moreover, it was the intent of resolving challenges when they arose. We will always have challenges. We will always have opportunities to improve. It is in the matter of how we go about. And that is not an age thing. It's not a millennial thing. It's a behavioral that is learnt when we are very young. Do we help to pull each other along? These wonderful colloquialisms we like to use, pay it forward. Please, that's been around for 100 years. You have to come to the table. Why? Because number one, your own mental state of mind. As we said, live next to Fort Dix McGuire Air Force. Every now and again we have one of those big carriers flying by, and every now and again we also have fighter helicopters flying by. At any rate, as we always like to say when we're interrupted, that's managing change through effective communications. So, the point of tonight's discussion, how do we optimize opportunities when there are challenges, is the intent that we bring to the table. Are we looking for knowledge and resources that help us improve the process? How do we message that among our stakeholders, among our family members, among our children? Let's take, for example, the fact of when children are starting to go back to school and they cannot congregate together. How do we message that? Or are we going to say, well, children of that age can't do that? I differ with that opinion simply because when you do go to the store, you see one set of children acting like wishnicks, and you see another set of children very well behaved. And it's not because of the scolding or heavy discipline. It's the socialization and how it's communicated. Just as in Europe, many young children drink at the table with their parents, whereas many children over here hide and go out to drink. So be careful with what you think is a process problem, and in fact is a communication challenge. This is going to be a short session today. We are working on, by the way, got great news. I know many people have known about learning platforms, and I've managed to get one at affordable. I've got a moth flying around here. We managed to secure a platform, so all my courses will be on the platform. We have 3 courses. I just have 2 of them. Go away. That's a moth. The platform will be up, I would say, within the next 30 days. And then you're going to see pretty much the whole menu of our services from the up here. I'm doing a little advertising, marketing, alignment optimization for business purposes, helping, again, collaborative efforts come together, a greater percentage of people who are looking to work together, or the outcome, we get a greater percentage of buy-in. And then secondly, of course, the greater percentage of actual achieved identified goals and objectives. That's the alignment optimization. And it can be scaled from small businesses, $2 million and up, to $500 billion organizations, educational municipalities, community organizations, churches, etc. Then, of course, we have our coaching, which is both individual, group, family, and organizational coaching, which we've been providing. I've been doing mentoring for the Project Management Institute, been mentoring for the Society for Human Resource Management way back in the day, tri-state group, and of course with the work that I've done with Toastmasters, which is always a pleasure, because I think Toastmasters is in effect one of the first stages that you can really begin to build your ability to communicate effectively and do leadership at the same time. And then, of course, Keynote Speaking. I believe in a partnership. So it's not just a matter of walking in and saying, well, we're going to talk about. Rather, it's what are the objectives and goals that we want to walk away with. So check out the site. We've got some great audio files being placed. The live chats, of course, are being improved a little bit more. And I hope that some of this information you find is beneficial and helpful on a daily basis. And we wrap both the business and the private life together, because when you're communicating, you're communicating. It is how we are communicating. What is it that we're trying to achieve? How we go about communicating. How do we recognize our own personal communication with ourselves? That's what we're focusing on. And that is a great amount of work that needs to be done, a great challenge, because as you can see from day to day, as this virus is impacting people wanting to go back to work, not understanding that there are professionals who are constantly, this moth is going to die when I come off of this. There are people who are professionals who understand what viruses, bacteria, infections do. And it's not about just a government agency or authority telling us yes or no. I think we have to put some faith in those people that have made their profession about protecting us as a species. That in and of itself sets up a whole other conversation. So, when you find a challenge at work, when you find a difficult communication at home, think about what is your objective. Is it mutually beneficial to all stakeholders, all parties, all members of your family? And how can you recognize your own emotional highs and lows, your triggers, so that you can begin to work with people in a more human, in a more disciplined, and certainly in a more friendly manner, so the outcome is one that people will say, I want to continue working with that individual. Because that's really the true test of effective communication. The micromanagement, the my way or the highway mentality is abrasive. It doesn't build long-term relationships. Trust is something that is certainly earned, and it can be established by the intent of getting into a conversation. So think about that. By all means, check out the other live chats and send me a comment from time to time. I'd love to engage. This is Ronald Allen, managing change through effective communications. You know where to find me.